Okay, that will make a start, and if anybody else wishes to join us, they can come on in. But yes, good morning, everyone, and welcome to Megagames at Work. This is the first MegaCon event of the day on Sunday, and Rob Grayston is going to be graciously giving this talk for us. Rob works for Nottingham County Council, I believe it is, Rob?
Council, but...
Okay, Nottingham Council, excellent. I should have asked that beforehand. Yeah, Nottingham Council as a as a very keen Megagame as well. But obviously, Rob is going to be talking about Megagames at Work today. So I'll hand over to you, Rob.
Thank you very much, Chris. So good morning, everybody, or at least if it's morning for you. And I am here to talk to you about, well, the thing that I think we're all really interested in, which is finding ways to be able to play games at work. So welcome to the third day of MegaCon. And before anyone comes for me, I know that Megagames have come out of professional environments originally, so just get that mentioned. This is the first time I have delivered the talk, so any comments or criticisms are welcome at the end. I do hope you're going to get something useful out of it, even if it is don't go to any of Rob's seminars again in future. So, well, as you can see, introduction. Who am I? My name is Rob Grayston, and I'm an emergency planning officer for a local government authority, which means I'm involved with putting together responses for everything from extreme weather to major infrastructure disturbances, with partner agencies, which include uniform services, utility companies, and volunteer agencies. I've been gaming since I was 8, and megagaming for about 7 years now, or to be precise, 6 years, 10 months, and as of today, 30 days, which equates to me having attended, on average, one megagame roughly every 65 days since March of 2015. I think that helps give some statistics around my being here, as I know some of us love a bit of quantifiable data in a slide deck. And if you're at this talk, that probably means you. And I'm talking about this because, for one, I love Megagames, and for two, I think they can just be gosh darn useful in a professional context. As you can probably guess, my job includes some thinking about what awful things might happen, and we just have to test those processes to make sure we've got an idea of being able to deal with things when they fall over. And then, of course, there's, well, what am I going to be talking about? Megagames in a professional context can mean different things to different people. And I'm assuming that most of us here are familiar with the idea of Megagames in a recreational context, and some of us possibly an educational one. So I'm not going to be talking about Megagames educationally or for an academic environment, or how to run them for fun, as there's a lot of content out there which can help you with that. Also, Megagames for causes, something else which might possibly have some bleed into what I'm talking about here, but again, is not the main thing that I'll be looking at. So this is now all aimed at you, humble attendees, getting games into what is probably, but not definitely, an office space and how it might be useful for you. So without further ado, that's something which I think some of you may need to have a moment to question why is this person having a slide in their deck about Megagames professionally with Megagames just crossed out. So the first rule of Megagames at Work Club is that we do not call ourselves Megagames at Work Club because we don't really want to use the word megagame if we're looking at using them in a professional capacity. I'm sure some people may disagree. Save those points for the end. General taxonomy, talking about how we name things, is absolutely fascinating for some people and a real turn off for others. I understand that. But there are a few good reasons for not using the term megagame. which means I get to talk to a captive audience about one of my favorite topics, classification. I can already hear the sighs of ennui through your muted microphones. So, move on to what do we say in that case, which is a very good question. What's in a name? And megagame could be a pretty meaningless term to a lot of people that you want to introduce to them, especially in a work environment. And even a lot of people in gaming spaces won't be entirely sure what you mean by megagame. So you should go for things that they might be more familiar with. Simulation, exercise, war game, operation. In a workplace setting, you may find more traction with all of these terms. They've all got their own issues. War game is something which is constantly brought up, and is it too aggressive, too militaristic? But it can help with the aversion that some people have to the term games. It might be a minor quibble, and not everyone is going to care so much, but in some professional environments, the difference between taking this seriously or not may hinge on whether your peers or decision makers think this is too flippant or fun. But I haven't met your co-workers, so you'll have to judge that one for yourself. Of course, to help confuse you all, I will still be using the term megagame throughout this talk, but you're all clever people, and I'm sure you'll understand what I mean. So, how are games used? Obviously, in a professional capacity. There are going to be more ways that you can possibly think of. I do not pretend that I'll be able to cover everything here, but these are just some overall thoughts. So games can be used for testing. They can test out processes, experiment with future processes or technology or ideas, and they can also find where there are faults or vulnerabilities, like penetration testing for digital security. It's a way of running through how something is supposed to work, how it could work, without needing to do it for real and possibly using a lot of resources, whether that's time, staff, equipment, a lot of cash, etc. Business continuity. This is one that I have some familiarity with. So this is basically making sure that if things do go sideways at some point for you, your business or service can still operate. It's for a worst case scenario and helps show what you might have to do in the unlikely event, and touch wood, if that's wood, that something unpleasant should happen in the workplace. For example, say, a worldwide pandemic. Training. As well as testing whether things work, there's also testing out how to make you work, basically, or how to make you work in a way that is needed. So Megagames can help with transferable skills, and even if you're not engaged in, for example, zombie fighting at work, you may have to engage in effective communication, timely prioritization, or resource forecasting, which are all things that you might also engage with in a megagame. So we've also got team building. And because there's a T in there, that's reminded me I should probably have a sip. Team building. So this one can be a little bit too much like fun, which isn't necessarily to be avoided. But again, it's not a recreational space, so don't always focus on that. And the team building aspect can be a byproduct of the other points which are here. If you are after something to get people to know each other, then megagames can be great. Just carry on as you would for a megagame that's for recreational purposes, if it's purely for team building. But it is a useful side effect of the other aspects. So looking at myself, emergency planning, which is something I wasn't entirely sure existed until about 2 years ago, and now I've ended up working in it. But I'll quickly mention here as examples what is involved with professional megagaming, gaming, simulations, exercises, war games for emergency planning. So why are exercises useful here? They help with how things can work in real life when talking about megagames at work. Emergency planning, we look at a lot of different scenarios, flooding, power outages, chemical leaks, things like that, and practicing dealing with these things is a lot easier than going out and flooding a village or setting a warehouse on fire, as you can understand, I'm sure. So what goes into planning them? We don't just decide that we're going to game a roving terrorist attack one day or a mass contaminated food outbreak because they sound like fun. These games are thought about as a means of testing plans that get updated every few years. And that means talking to a lot of partner organizations like the Fire Brigade or the Environment Agency. And we will talk about what everyone wants to get out of these exercises. Some of these scenarios may go well beyond what is expected of a mega game. I mean, how often for a mega game do you need to do site visits during a week? As some of these exercises can last several days. And some of them can be smaller, so regular tabletop exercises, more similar to a matrix game. More about matrix games shortly. And then, of course, what can they help with? So doing these exercises means we can see what may or may not work with certain elements of our contingency planning. Sometimes ideas on paper can be proven kind of to not necessarily be so effective. So let's have a look at a specific example of a need for some planning which can lead to a game. And here we have the Blackstart, guest starring one of my kitchen plugs. So what exactly is the need here? Well, for yourself, there might be things around supply chains, different business continuity, service delivery, future expansions. But Blackstart for us is one of the, for a lot of people actually, is one of the big scary ones, because it's effectively a major power outage where you can't just flip a switch on and everything comes back. The cause could be a malicious cyber attack, a solar flare, or as in Lancashire in the UK in 2015, flooding hit a power substation and the power was just out. They couldn't just turn it back on again. So you can probably see why we would need to think about gaming this scenario. Electricity is needed to run modern society, and if it stops working, then there are lots of issues for petrol stations, hospitals, how we communicate with each other. There's a big list of things that would be impacted. So the business case should be fairly self-explanatory. But then how do you even start to game something like that? Which is a question that gets asked even by people who have to look at these things. It needs a lot of research and input from different organizations, which will need to be contacted and informed about it before the exercise happens. So there's a lot of planning involved, a lot of moving parts. You need to be incredibly thorough, and you need to have big run-ups for something like this. We're talking not just a few weeks or a few months, but like over a year for larger plans. You can obviously do it on smaller scales, but something big with a lot of moving parts may need a long time to plan. Especially with something like Blackstart. Almost every question you ask leads to 2 more questions, which will need to be thought about and considered for gaming it. A previous run through of a scenario of Blackstart, based in the UK on a county level, had a lot of very useful findings. There were various different agencies involved, and some of them included things like finding out various fuel pumps for certain agencies' vehicles were run on electricity, so they couldn't necessarily refuel their vehicles, or that a certain telecommunications company would not share information on the location of its public phone boxes unless these were requested postcode by postcode, which, as the phone boxes are often wired in and don't use cell phone towers, they could potentially still be operating, and you could understand why you might need access to wired communication in a situation like that. So this is an example of running through an exercise, and it tells you, basically informs you, these are the things you need to know. So what use are games? Well, how do we test for things? Some games can be used to test things that might otherwise be difficult to account for, capability of your digital security, resource allocation when budgets are shrinking, or whatever it is that's in your industry specific to you, your workplace specific to you. I'm not your colleague, so I won't know what you're after. It can help highlight flaws when it comes to finding potentially difficult problems that you should be ready to deal with. Just look at the Blackstart example previously. There may be some unknowns, to bring up an unfortunate historic quote. And even if you don't know about something, it can still negatively impact on you. So if you game through something, you might find out about it beforehand. I mean, there may be difficulties that you could face that would cause big reputational, commercial, or internal morale-based damage, and they can be identified. So it also helps with getting your people used to each other and just the situation they're going through. Something that's useful for Megagames is that you can bring a wide group of people together, and for some crises, you may need colleagues to know who to talk to, how best to talk to them on an everyday basis. There may be no reason for someone in your warehouse to talk to someone from the communications team, or someone in marketing to talk to someone from editorial. But in some situations, those people knowing each other, or knowing who to talk to, or having even just met each other briefly, really helps with that connection, and it can just speed things up and help with knowing who to get hold of and the best way to operate in your own environment. So testing a specific plan for a specific situation can make people also feel more comfortable and less likely to hesitate in these situations. And it doesn't matter whether it's nervousness around leading a training session on teamwork, or managing a severe flood at a storage facility, which could wipe out a load of your products. People do fire drills, so why not test for other important stuff like this? So, why should I use them? What would they be for? This is something I might be able to advise you on, but it really is a case-by-case issue. So, in the Megagame space, I'm aware of games being run for corporate team building, simulating hospital administration for two NHS trusts merging, and a local governmental authorities housing provision commitments, and forecasting on what that local government authority might need in the future. So those aren't necessarily the normal things you think about when it comes to Megagames, because there are no aliens or empires, and there might be some coups, but they generally have lower body counts. There's a big difference between let's make a game unique for the company that's for fun, for team building, and let's make a game that tests out how many trade shows and conferences we can effectively resource for the next 3 calendar years. So yeah, when you're thinking about, should I use these? Think about what they're for and think about the scale. So it's not been mentioned so much until now, but scale is something else to consider. You may initially think that a mega game is what you're after, when really you're after a, what some people call a kilo game, which is a smaller scale but adjacent to a mega game kind of setup, or perhaps a matrix game. And matrix games are based on debating, or you might say arguing, your way through different scenarios with using what you know about the situation to be able to best structure why what you're putting forward will work out or should work out. And there will be a facilitator or an umpire who can look at your argument, look at someone else's argument, and maybe with a little bit of slight random chance in there, help decide what would be the possible outcome. So it's a bit like devil's advocate, the game, you could say. Not everything needs to be sort of 50 players and taking a day. You might run something with 30 players and take an afternoon. You might want something that's 12 people and it's 90 minutes long. And these can all still be really valuable and use gaming to help your company, service, whatever it is you're doing in a professional environment. And it uses a lot of the same techniques and resources as for mega games. So will they bring value or prove worthwhile? A game, well, it may start off with a clear vision and you know what you want to examine or teach people as you go. It could be that this vision becomes murky or the question it was asking has already been answered. Maybe a mega game is not the best way to resolve what you're looking at, and a couple of hours of number crunching on Excel could do just as well. These things can take time to set up and organize, so bear that in mind. And don't game for the sake of gaming. It's possible that in some circumstances, people may get into their heads that gaming is a cool fad, like stand-up meetings or ice cream and pizza parties. Games can be fun, but if people just want to hang out with their team or build up some relationships, then have you considered werewolf or coup? So, how do I make them? If you've gone through this and found that you do have a case for producing a mega game, how do you even start to create it? This is where things get more specific, and you will need to spend time thinking about your own industry needs, whilst also possibly talking to people who've done this kind of thing before. So it could be someone who has done scenarios, exercises, simulations from your own industry, or a mega game designer that you trust who can understand what your requirements are. Try thinking about similar games or mechanics from games that you can use, which leads on to just don't be worried about stealing things. Mega game designers do it all the time. I could do a whole talk on designing games professionally, although again, it would be tied to specific industries, but we don't have time for that right now. So when making a workplace game, basically think about how fresh mechanics and processes and unique stuff in a game might be fun and cool and show that you're a good designer. But if there's something that does what you need in another game, lift it. I mean, as an example, as an emergency planner, there are certain similarities between Jim Wallman's Urban Nightmare and completely random hypotheticals. Say, for example, how local authorities in the UK could respond to, I don't know, a nationwide shortage of fuel. So in Urban Nightmare, where the players are US state officials, this requires escalating by state of emergency to different levels of authority so you can get more resources to deal with the zombies. In this fantasy UK fuel crisis, local government officials could be aware that there are things they need as the situation deteriorates, and so they need to escalate. But they're also made aware that if they do escalate, then there could possibly be additional unrest, panic, and reputational damage. And so hypothetically, they're told that they can't when the fuel crisis is happening. But who knows? If that ever happens, I'm sure there may be some similarities that would teach valuable lessons. And then don't overcomplicate it. You might be a gamer, and some of your colleagues might also be gamers. It's likely that the majority of people you're playing games with aren't. And whilst they might be very clever, they won't necessarily get games. So think about the language you're using to explain concepts to them and how many steps different processes in a game might take. Visualizing information in a bold, clear fashion always helps. So how do I run them? You may be in the fortunate position of already having run or controlled Megagames before. Perhaps you've done a lot of project management, crisis communication, or games mastering, all helpful stuff to provide those delicious transferable skills that can help you put a game together and run it for your colleagues. Be professional. Sounds like an obvious one. It's work, not a games night. Just because it involves some kind of gaming doesn't mean you should relax and focus on everyone having fun. There will be different priorities, like focusing on how to capture data about the simulation's activity, rather than guaranteeing the human scientists are having fun trying to decipher the alien messages before Russia or the US launch nukes. And then ask for help. As Megagamers, a lot of us are really awful at asking for assistance. We feel that Megagames are our personal babies, and we might be too proud or too shy to ask for support. That's baloney. And when it comes to running games in a professional environment, the stakes are higher. Include people from your workplace and treat it like a team project. Get advice, ask people if things make sense on aspects that are to do with their areas, and look for the right kinds of people who might make good facilitators in your workplace, i.e. people who could be control. Have them check things over, and don't forget that depending on the game and its sensitivity to your company, you can always ask external people for help, informally, or perhaps even invite them to be facilitators on the day. So how do I prove their worth? I went through a lot of pictures to find one that was appropriate for this, and I thought that struck the right chord. So you've got bang for buck. Sometimes you've got to go straight to the bottom line. Time to develop a game that's specific to your needs, that can get the best results for the lowest cost in place of more expensive training or consultants or tech solutions. Yeah, games can do that. Time investment for those involved. A single game might be 3 hours, whole day or longer, could be a better use of resources, similar to how funding is allocated with bang for buck. Talk to experts. This will vary on your own professional environment again, and there are a lot of people who will no doubt be happy to chat. A few names that occasionally come up within Megagames, frequently come up, might be people including Jim Wallman, Major Tom Moat, Professor Rex Brennan, all got a lot of experience with a wide variety of people from different backgrounds, gaming for different purposes. And yeah, they have the experience which might be useful for you. But it doesn't mean they're the only people who might be able to help. For example, if I wanted to talk to someone about a fashion and textiles game, then I would talk to Harrison Tatum Wyatt of Megagame Assembly, or a game based on tourism, I would talk to Johan Olofsson of the Gothenburg Megagamers. You obviously want to get people on side. I'm not in your office. I don't know your office culture, and I'm not here to tell you how to best interact with your co-workers, although friendly notes, don't microwave any fish in a public kitchen. Persuade them that these things are good ideas, especially if they're decision makers. It might not be proving the game's worth, but it really helps if you're pitching ideas to a friendly crowd. Pro gaming culture here, basically for long-term benefits. If gaming starts now, in theory, they can only streamline, innovate, and become generally easier to do, which in turn will reduce resource loads needed for them later on. And based on my understanding from professional and recreational games, like in terms of long-term, that long-term could be a couple of years, in which point you've got everything down and you're getting useful results from running occasional games. And then back it up with evidence. So this is tying into the expert point again, but facts, figures, this can be harder to do as outside of military and security, there's not a huge amount published, but that doesn't mean you can't still have a look, or at least talk to some of those experts, whether your own industry or some of the people I've mentioned, and take notes. So, there we go. So yeah, as you can see, fun is allowed, and I would encourage that you do try to get some fun in there. A lot of these pictures are from recreational games with one design session and one team building exercise from a corporate session. But the occasional funny hat, having serious subjects which are sometimes gamed in a lighter fashion can be useful. And it can help people ease into scenarios. It doesn't hurt that if an exercise is enjoyable, it will stick with colleagues. They might not remember anything about it, but they will remember how they felt, and that will help with supporting future games in your workplace. So those associations are important. Getting close to the end now. So here is another quick example of a game that I ran called Collegium. Prior to my current role, I was employed by a famous and old UK-based university. In my time there, I was privy to lots of different workings, goings on, and I found out that many people who worked there and studied there didn't necessarily know how things worked, how any of it operated, how things interacted. So I thought there was a need to basically create something which was slightly separated from the actual institution. So I put a load of magic over the top of it and ended up with Collegium, explaining how a collegiate style university might operate. Basically to try and inform some decision makers how various different aspects could affect some of what some of the things they were doing and how it could impact on other parts of the institution. It involved teams based on colleges. They had their own identities and objectives. And from that, you might have some students from one college having more in common with students from another college than from the staff of their own college. So again, could be a possibly similar setup to an actual UK university institution, which may or may not have had difficulties with some of its internal workings. Now, none of this accounted for player shenanigans, and so Fairyland abducted an unfortunately large proportion of academic students and support staff. But this was after I had left the role, so it was running a recreational capacity, but it was originally designed for a professional reason. Okay. Here we go, some conclusions. You can read those for yourself. I'm sure you may have thought of some more. And because these slides will be made available after, I will now just buzz through the rest. Some resources for you. Connections, online conference, very useful. Not just about security and defense. I met some people who were also emergency planners, and there was a great game that we did about COVID and basically professionally how to minimize COVID impact. Megagame Assembly, you should be familiar with. Stone, Paper, Scissors, which is Jim Wallman's professional outfit, has some free games on there. Definitely have a look at those. And then Map Symbols, which is Major Tom Murrat's website, which has some matrix games. And I would fully recommend that you have a look at those because they can be adapted and kind of useful for your own purposes. And then here's some audience questions. And then just to let you know, as and when you do grab slides, there is a quick simulation first thoughts template. So if you're thinking about running something yourself, you can put notes down and have a think through it. And this will just basically form some bare bones if you want to be able to pull your own stuff together. So there we go. Any questions?
Thank you, Rob. That's really interesting. Yes, I was going to ask you to go back to the audience questions. That's cool. So yeah, they're on screen. Obviously, if anybody in the audience, I'll probably just go through some of these in a second. But if anybody in the audience has got any questions, I'll absolutely ask those as well. And we've got one from Becky first up. Have you done any online games? And if so, have you generally used the systems that colleagues are already using, for example, Teams or Zoom maybe, or have you tried to migrate them onto another system like Discord?
Thank you very much for that, Becky. That's a good question. I have seen games being used professionally online. I've not done any of those myself, although I've seen that there is planning for using that in some local government disaster response later in the year. And for things like that, people want to use the systems that they would be using as and when something falls over. So they want to use Teams, and there's a government website called Resilience Direct where you upload a lot of information and you can put maps and grab reports. So they will be wanting to use Teams because they'd be using Teams in an actual incident, and they'll be using Resilience Direct because that's what they'd be using in an actual incident. So it's not something I have done, but it's something I've seen, and it's something I will be doing later this year.
Yeah, fantastic. Obviously, at the beginning of the talk, you mentioned about not using the term Megagame because nobody really knows what it means. And Bernie mentioned crisis management games was the name that was used in the 1970s.
Yeah, that's a really good term. Crisis management, crisis resolution. Some people really enjoy using that because it feels weighty and important. And I get that, but not all games in a professional capacity will necessarily be crisis based, but in the right circumstances, yeah, it helps also set expectations about how people should be approaching these things. Because again, some people might turn up and think, oh, it's a game, it'll be fun, and some people might be turning up thinking this is a game, but it's a game so that we can stop the company losing millions of quid or stop some people dying. So yeah, it sounds heavy. But it could be really genuinely quite useful. And that expectation setting is part of that.
Yes, most definitely. Maybe not in the professional sense, but Becky said this is something that she almost said in her marketing talk yesterday, which will be available on our YouTube in a few weeks' time. But is it helpful to call your game? So it is obviously helpful to call your game a mega game in the marketing, directly to the mega game in the audience. But obviously, you need to explain to others. So maybe immersive gaming event might be more helpful, and possibly maybe in a professional environment as well.
Thanks for that. I'm going to say no, because for most people, immersive, it sounds good for a recreational market. For professionals, immersive, what does that mean for us? Are we going to be playing the game when we go home? I think sticking to simulation, exercise, operation, war game, things which are established. Immersive it's like the XKCD comic about, oh no, there are too many different plug types. Don't worry, I'll make a standard one. Oh, now there's an extra plug type. So yeah, I think fine for recreational. I don't think that's necessarily so useful for the professional space.
And I'm not sure, maybe you can't tell us exactly what you've got planned for the rest of this year, but did you have any plans for any simulations or any games in your work environment?
So there will be a small scale one based around Blackstart, and we will be looking at all the electricity turning off. What do we do next? Which a lot of people are very excited by. A lot of people, as you can understand, have some trepidation about, because if we find out things are falling over that we didn't know about, we'll have to then work out how to fix them. But these are things that can be shared with other local authorities and partner agencies. And the big one is towards the end of the year. We've got an exercise which is going to cover 18 different local authority areas, and it'll be about major flooding. And it's going to include central London civil servants, and it's going to include sort of the northeast counties. I think because they had their games scheduled at the same time, Cornwall, Devon, Dorset, and Somerset will also be part of it. which may mean that the civil servants and central agencies will then have queries around, do we send resources to the southwest, or do we send it to the Midlands and the northeast? Which I'm sure will be a very interesting question for them. But yeah, there are some games planned, definitely, and one really big one. And that big one is also going to last a week. So we're going to have people from voluntary agencies, including St. John's and the Red Cross. We're going to have people from armed forces, all the emergency services, Environment Agency and the Met Office, as flooding is very much their shtick. And we're going to be looking at best ways to produce resilient responses to a major flood, which should be interesting.
Yeah, they keep you on your toes, most definitely. Bernie's asked, are there any issues with collecting a control team if the exercise is over, say, a dozen participants?
Yeah, so with that, there are some people who've got more experience than others, but they're not always necessarily available. And just because someone's got a lot of experience doesn't mean they'll necessarily be the best control or facilitator. So it does sometimes end up being a little bit like Megagames recreationally, which is you get who turns up. So if someone wants to volunteer, that's great. You can definitely tell people to volunteer or volunteer them. But
voluntold, my boss likes saying.
Yeah, you have to think about, again, will these people be suitable as control? But also for the people involved, it may genuinely be more useful to have some of these people playing through a scenario than being a facilitator. As some of these people, when they're playing the scenario, may be getting experience of doing a thing they will need to do in a crisis situation. And yeah, crisis is the one I'm using because emergency planning. But for whatever your own work environment might be, it might sometimes be more useful to have somebody playing who would otherwise be a good control, because they'll be running through the situation that they might need to run through for real. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that was a very illuminating talk. Thank you, Rob. Very much appreciate it. It's a different take, obviously, on games in a much more fresh environment. So thank you. I guess we'll retire to the pub now in the Discord server for a few minutes if anybody wants to come across and chat to Rob. Otherwise, thank you for your time and really appreciate it. Cheers, Rob.